the answer's right in front of us. I'm not sure we want to know what it is.
I was all pumped up and I'm saying, how many of you intentionally rest? That was my first words out of my mouth. I had them, you could hear a pin drop.
All right, guys, welcome back to another Rest, Eat, Move podcast. It's been a while since the both of us have been live in the studio together, been traveling, been speaking. You've been doing mulch, trimming bushes. What else you been doing? But anyway, we're excited to be back talking about something. I know you woke up this morning thinking, I got to learn more about this, but it's about running from the bear. So we're going to talk about stress, rest, rejuvenation. But I like that title, Running from the Bear, because, I think we're all in different times running from the bear, even when the bear isn't there. Many times, I would say 99% of the time, the bear isn't there.
Yeah, you were in Montana with your wife Holly, and
Yeah, they go at a different pace.
a little different pace. Get up in the morning looking at the mountains.
Yeah,
It's pretty cool.
they don't use as much. They have a lot of flip phones and cowboy boots and cowboy hats, but there's still stress. But I wrote something down before we begin. Do we really want to know the answer to stress? Do you really want to know how to solve your anxiety? Example, the Montana, like, you're going to find out as we have this discussion, like, the answer's right in front of us. I'm not sure we want to know what it is. When you think about anxiety that's just crippling the country, whether it's acute or chronic or really bad anxiety, let's just say it's a 25-year-old female that's overstimulated, overworked, running hard, overtraining, and they're on their phone 7 hours a day. Do they really want to know the answer? And that's what we're going to talk about today. We're running from the bear. Stress is melting us down. We're under resting. We're overtraining. We're overworked. We're overbreathing. We're undersleeping, and we're underspacing. But all of those are super fixable. Again, we're going to talk about the immune system. 80% of our disease comes from stress. Do we really want to know the answer? And that's what we're talking about today.
I think most people do, because you can't change unless you have self-awareness. And I truly don't believe, and we do this from stage, my Rest, Eat, Move book, I kind of begin with that. But, most people don't really, I never really knew what stress was until I trained with Dr. Phil Nierenberger. I always thought that stress was, everybody's stressed, you're busy, you're doing whatever, but I didn't really understand what it was. And so if I didn't really understand what it was, how do you fix it? And then you realize, back in the day when I first started in this, it was all about exercise, or nobody ever talked about rest. I mean, sleep, whatever, but it was never an issue.
That's called being lazy. Grandma would tell you, get up and go.
Just get moving, get moving. And when we were training at the Michigan Athletic Club, we didn't talk a lot about the rest and rejuvenation. And in the Rest, Eat, Move book, that's the sequence. Got to get the sequence correct. And that's the rest is before the move and before the eat. So
if somebody came to you with 100% certainty, you've been kind of not crippled, you're functioning, but let's just say you have this overwhelming anxiety. A lot of people come to see you in the last 5 years more than ever before with this anxiety. And you tell them, if you took that phone and you threw it in the water, the pond, you didn't look at it for a month, 90 days, let's even go extreme, 1 year, you could have a telephone and get access. A large portion of people's worry tends to go away. You put the phone down for 24 hours, for example, and you kind of stop having that urgency, that fast pace. And that's what I think is important to kind of talk about, because we've always had stress. Humans have always had stress. The bear, fight or flight.
But it's different.
It's really different over the last 15 years, accelerated to 10, and I would say 5 to each year that goes by. You're going to see this. You got AI now, and you can't even tell the difference between a human and this is going to create a little bit of an issue, and we're going to get into the science of why that's an issue. But
I think you're making a great point. Would you do something about it? A lot of people are not going to do anything about it. because they're chasing.
Well, I just worked with some new advisors down in St. Pete. They love this information, and they come afterwards and they have all these complex issues. They look pretty normal,
Well, sure.
complex issues, and we're going to get into science, and the science is telling you right there immune suppression, weight gain, some of these diseases, can't sleep, ADHD. Oh, there's a new one. It's called it's where you suddenly feel like you're going to faint from being overstimulated, and young girls in their 18 to 25 are under all this pressure, and so now they can categorize themselves of having this syndrome, and they can get out of test taking and different situations where they can't handle the pressure. And so that's happening because we're so stressed. But it really comes down to this pace. So we're going to talk about running from the bear. I love this. You wrote this in the book. I thought it was gold. We're under resting, we're overtraining, overworked, overbreathing, undersleeping, underspacing, and to do more, we must rest more.
To do more, we must rest more.
So let's get into stress. What is stress? Talk to me about stress.
Well, when I first thought of stress, I never really thought of it in from really what the definition is physical. And so I always thought stressors were stress. Stressors aren't stress. Stress is physical. So if you feel threatened by a stressor, your body's going to react physically. Heart rate goes up, blood pressure goes up, pupils dilate. I did stress testing way back in the day in the hospital. When we start the exercise test on a treadmill, if the blood pressure didn't go up, the resting heart rate didn't go up, then we terminate the test. And
because they're at too high.
Because you're already starting to tax the body physically, stress, and so everything should go up. If it doesn't go up, then we have problems. So stress is physical, immune system, digestion, muscle fatigue, muscle contraction.
There's some physiological effect.
Yep, and it doesn't matter. This is always interesting. It doesn't matter whether the stressor is real or not. If you perceive the threat, it doesn't matter. And so what you said at the very beginning is really where, back in the day, we had yellow fever and lots of stuff, diseases out there, running from predators. That was acute stress.
Yeah, it's interesting. So you say you can't touch it. So what is stress? You can't touch it. But wouldn't you say most people think they can touch it?
Yeah, but when you say the word stress, people understand it. They kind of they've experienced it.
Yeah.
But where is it?
Well, so you hear like when people say, "Can you touch stress?" Yeah. Some people say, "Yeah, I know what stress is. It's my spouse, it's my coworker, it's my boss, it's the news, it's the president, but that isn't stress.
That's stressors.
Yeah, and so when you think about physical, we do think like the word physical, you think you can touch it. No, it's an internal physical.
Yes.
Physiological.
Mm-hmm.
That could potentially have started psychologically.
Well, the other thing too, I never understood this when you think of stress is how you think can make you sick. How is that possible? I mean, just a thought can make me sick? And reality is yes, because if I feel threatened, the body's going to react physically, right? So that was always I never really quite I couldn't grasp that until I trained with Dr. Phil Nirenberg, and he kept talking about stress as physical. And I'm like, wow, if I feel threatened, my body's going to react that way.
So that's why chronic stress is an issue. So like, think about smoking a pack of cigarettes. You smoke one, sure, maybe there's not a tremendous physiological adaptation, but over time, that chronic smoking cigarettes breaks the body down. Same thing with stress it's the chronic. When I first started speaking, you would get nerves and anxious to speak. You get in front of people.
Sure.
Many people think, public speaking is one of the most fearful things in the world. I mean, there's a large population that would rather do anything.
Mm-hmm.
But as you get comfortable, you kind of lose maybe that anticipation anxiety because you've done it before. But what's required to really be a true professional speaker, not just someone reading a bullet points at a podium, is fight or flight. You need to get into that performance space of I'm on. Because you're not going to want to go to the bathroom when you're speaking. You're not going to want to
Nope, you're right.
you're going to want to have the body heat up, the energy go, the
You got to
focus.
perform.
You got to perform. It's the same thing with sports. But what I found is like when I first got speaking that transition was really long. So you're anxious about it, you're thinking about it, and you're in this fight or flight for a long time, and it kind of wears you out. Now when I speak, it's like I actually try to get myself to get there quicker because it gets me into this thing. And when I took Dale Carnegie, and he was so wise, he didn't always have the science, but if you act enthusiastic, you'll be enthusiastic. That's one of his sayings. And when I really, we try to hide, or we try to navigate or avoid being anxious. It's not a comfortable thing. But when you look at anxiety and excitement, they're identical physiologically. The difference is psychologically, one is negative. There's harm.
Yeah, so one's arousal.
And one is positive.
Right.
So I'm excited to go to play golf. I feel the same way. I'm nervous that I'm going to fail at this presentation. And that's the power of the mind. Dr. Phil talks about it. But physiologically, the same things are happening.
And so again, fear is different than the arousal you're talking about.
Right.
So that's the big difference. Like Dr. Phil's book, one of the things I loved about he explained fear.
Strong and Fearless.
Strong and Fearless. It was his book. So if you want to check that out, Strong and Fearless by Dr. Phil Nuremberger. But fear paralyzes you because, again, now I feel threatened. You know this. You played college golf. You go out and play with your buddies on a Tuesday. You're just goofing around. Maybe you're playing a scramble. What kind of shots do you hit?
Sure.
You're never thinking about three-putting. You just perform at a high level. But why can't you do that? And you see that the best players. I remember, a couple of the pros, they had a whoop on them, and they were putting. And what's the announcer right now? With
Immelman?
No, it starts with a K. He's
Kisner?
Kisner.
Yeah.
So Kisner is cool
Kevin Kisner.
Cool as a cucumber.
Sure.
And then they have the whoop up there, and his heart rate's at 142 putting.
Yeah.
Well, he's not running. He's putting. So his anxiety level must be pretty high while he's on the putt.
And we can handle that acute, and that's what it is, I think.
You can handle acute.
And that's also one of my things in life is I played collegiate golf where you get that heart rate going to 140 without doing any physical.
You're not doing nothing.
Your legs are a little bit wobbly. You got to hit this tee shot.
But if you were doing that on a Tuesday by yourself, you're not having the same.
Yeah, or if you do it every day, 24 hours a day, even when there's not much pressure on the line, that's when the body breaks down.
And if you feel more arousal, you're probably going to perform at a high level versus fear.
Right.
So if I have arousal, and that's what you're talking about.
Yeah, and then all those fears, and we could go down the reasons why we have primal fear. But let's keep going down this path. So you can't touch it; it's physical, but you can't hide from it. Everyone's felt this stress, this physical. A couple myths: there's no such thing as good and bad stress. It's stress.
I think people always thought there's good stress and there's bad stress.
Well, it's kind of what you're saying, arousal. And,
there's arousal.
There is stress happening on the body. The reason you exercise is you're stressing the body to adapt.
Making the body to adapt. Hot and cold.
Another myth is we need stress to perform at our best. Arousal versus stress is what you're talking about. And that's what I had to learn in my world of speaking or golfing. And, there's times where I didn't have my A game, which creates a lot of fear, but you got to learn how to, because that's not going to make it better. Let's just say you don't have your A game. The last thing you want is more fear. And so, performance is a big part of it. But how
again, I look at speaking. I was speaking in Miami Beach a few weeks ago for a really nice, beautiful company and large crowd and great audience and everything else. But before, and again, I come from backstage. They have a door and it's pretty cool. You come up but backstage, I'm I'm getting warmed up. Because I got to come out there with that energy.
Yeah, you got to act enthusiastic.
But I'm excited to be out there. I'm not worried. I'm not worried about what I'm going to say. I'm not fearful, whatever. But because like sometimes when you look at the unknown, then people get sometimes that becomes more stress.
So in public speaking, what are people worried about? I'm going to look dumb. I'm going to lose my job.
Step on my tongue.
Say something stupid. So it is that there is a fear that steps in.
But if you look at it differently, again, back to the perception, you look at it like this is going to be fun. It's exciting. It's now I'm on.
So we have again what we're saying, and we got to this earlier, but we actually have control over our reaction.
Mm-hmm.
But how has stress changed? And this is probably, did I introduce you to this book? Why Zebras Get Ulcers, or vice versa?
No, I think you introduced it to me. I loved it.
And then I listened to it on tape because it's upbeat.
It's really good on tape.
And then reading it it's a thick book. I think I saw him originally on 60 Minutes, and he's just an interesting, fascinating professor.
But the audio is fantastic to listen to.
So why zebras don't get ulcers? So here's the answer. So do you think a zebra or a lion or a bear or a dog has stress? They sure do, but they don't have worry. And that's where we're going to get to. So when I talked earlier and I was trying to kind of tee you up in a way, kind of set you up, but do people really want to know the answer? Well, I think stress is a complicated thing that people know they need. I think I've always asked this question, like, in a perfect world, do we have stress or don't we have stress? And the answer is, yeah, we have stress. We need stress. We need to have that fight or flight response. But zebras don't get ulcers because they're not worrying about stress 3 weeks from now for something that may or may not happen. And that's the difference between...
Yeah, they don't care about if Social Security is going to disappear in 10 years or, they don't
What's
think about
the stock
that.
market doing today?
Mm-hmm.
No. They will be around no matter what the stock market does. And that's all they're doing. They're trying to survive, live.
They're in the now.
They're in the now. So how's our stress change? Well, zebras don't get ulcers. Humans do. 80% of our disease come from stress.
80%.
And then let's connect some of those dots. 90% of our disease comes from inflammation. When we start talking about cortisol and glucocorticoids and how this is creating this inflammatory response, 80% of our disease come from potentially how we perceive threat. 80%.
Yeah, what we're saying to ourselves.
Chronic versus acute stress is chronic stress. It's the chronic stress that's killing us. And this is a valid point. Like, when golfing is not a great example because not everyone maybe has felt that nervousness. But let's just say you're out in the woods and an animal that you can't feel like you can outfight shows up, and you can't stay around, like it's a bad situation. You're going to shoot adrenaline into your quads. You're going to get that feeling like, wow, I gotta go. And the body responds to that threat.
Yeah, you're in high alert.
Yeah, fight or flight.
Yep, blood pressure goes up, heart rate goes up.
And so you have two options. You can fight whatever that threat is, or you can flee.
Right.
Or
you're going to run.
Acutely, that is such a fantastic, amazing survival mechanism. That's
Thank
what
goodness we have it.
Chronically, though, here's what that looks like. You're at your desk. You get an email. Email says you made a typo on this important email you sent out to the whole company, or your kids have the day off because the school is closed, or whatever comes in, whatever threat. That can turn into chronic stress. But the truth is, do you need adrenaline shot into your quadriceps at 9 a.m. in the morning for either one of those?
No, because you're going to go into fight or flight.
Right. So what happens is most people are going into fight or flight all day, every day, for many different reasons. And this chronic stress physiologically breaks the body down. You hear about blood pressure. Oh, I got high blood pressure. It kills us. High blood pressure. Well, what's causing the high blood pressure? It's chronic stress. Or you hear about the immune system. 30 million Americans are on autoimmune suppressing or or
Mhm.
modification type of a
Right.
drug. These are the
Sleep.
gut health or
Yeah, sleep,
digestion.
digestion. Mhm.
So chronic versus acute is really important. And then stressors. You like to talk about stressors. What are stressors?
Well, they can be anything. It could be a stressor could be finance. So it could be, can I pay my mortgage? Do I have enough money in retirement? A stressor could be your health. Maybe my health is poor. I'm always thinking about it, worrying about it. Could be relationships, could be your spouse, your kids, coworkers. Again, walking to work or walking to school, you have this scary dog. You're thinking about it. So it doesn't really matter. It comes in all shapes and sizes. And what one is a stressor for one person is not a stressor for the other.
A stressor for one person might be an arousal or an
Yeah,
excitement for someone else.
correct.
Mhm.
So again, starting to recognize what your stressors are. That's the big
I
deal.
always like to say, like my sister-in-law, Kara, she's a police officer, and she loves what she does.
Mm-hmm.
And she tells me these stories I'm thinking, I'm already melting. I'm listening to the stories and
And you're already
and
physically stressed.
law enforcement does have a health related job specific, but it's our reaction.
It's our reaction.
It's our perception. It's how
It's the
it's the lens. It's
conversation.
the lens we look at it.
Mhm. And when I wrote in the book, I said we have about give or take 50,000 thoughts a day, but we repeat about 90% of those thoughts. And so for many people, they keep repeating. We've all done this. What are your top 3 stressors? And most people say it's money, it's relationships, it may be my health, whatever it might be. But then we keep, we don't know how to reframe that.
So when you first got in this space, and we humans been around a long time. So let's just call those the 3 big ones. And there's probably different ones, or we're not going to go specific. But then you start adding to that container the stock market, the news, a country,
Yeah.
bombings,
Correct.
airplanes, donations, like it goes on and on and on. And what
Never
happens
ends.
is our container gets full. So I speak, and when I speak, I say, we now know things happening in a different country to a place we will never visit in a very negative, fearful
Mhm.
type of information. And so this information access on top of, we've already been designed to kind of have these primal threats. And what ends up happening is many, many, many of our stress responses are things that will never happen.
Yeah, I always say, you're opening the bottle of wine before it's time. And so you're thinking about something that's going to happen that
Or maybe never happens.
or most likely will never happen.
Yeah.
And then the other thing too is we talk about is if you have something you're constantly worried about, but if you keep drilling down on that, reframing, it's probably not as scary as you really think. And then you start really thinking about maybe it's a good thing that I have this awareness, this arousal, or this stress, and now I can do something about it.
Yeah,
like if I don't think I have enough money in retirement, if you systematically started saving 15% or whatever you're doing, then now that's more of a positive thing versus, a negative thing.
It's the same thing we talk about with like athletes is you're trying to create a process because you can't control the outcome. And so like if you're worried about whatever retirement, the only thing you can control is what you do today.
Correct.
And tomorrow.
And what seeds you're planting today.
Yes, for tomorrow, and then you do it again tomorrow, and that's compound interest, and that's investing.
And that's what we talk about with health. Like I have people coming into me, and I already
they want to change what they did 5.
Yeah, I ask them, what are your top 3 stresses? First thing they always say is my health. Constantly think about it. All right, so what if we thought about it a little differently? If we did a couple baby steps, would you feel better about it? Yeah, I would feel a lot better. And so now you're taking more control, back to where you're control. Now they feel, yeah, it's not as bad as I thought if I'm doing stuff for that versus just thinking the sky's falling and I'm not going to.
There's a school in New York that this guy is trying to do this experiment to see if they can remove technology from the school. So no phones. When I went to school, you couldn't have your phone. You get it in trouble. Today, they don't know what to do. So they're trying to do it. And for the first 3 weeks to a couple months, people are just up in arms. My kids don't have my cell phone. They can't communicate with them. The teachers are struggling with it. And what some of the arguments are is like, if there's a attack at the school, I need my kid to be able to call me. That's a very common response. And what ended up happening after that little period of pain, these students stopped wanting their phone. They felt calmer. They liked it. They communicated. The relationships got better. The teachers could teach. The learning got better. And he's documenting this right now. It's actually live happening in this moment. But the arguments still are like, I can't communicate with my kid. Well, then they come back and they say, let me tell you about these stats. Let's just say there is an incident. What happens is somebody or many people, they call their parents swarm to the thing. You block the vehicles, the emergency
Gets
responders.
worse.
It clogs up the system. And
Yes.
so I'm not saying technology is all evil. I use it
No.
every day, but
It's a tool.
what ends up happening is we were beautifully designed. And when we start to play that whack-a-mole, like get rid of that pain, well, something else is going to pop up over here. And so
and again, the proof's in the pudding. You see what the diseases are now facing us.
yeah,
They're different, completely different than they used to be.
yeah. And I gotta find this acronym for this new one where, people are getting out of tests. They're getting out of stressful situations because they're overstimulated. Like that never could happen. I mean,
Right.
not to make light of it, but if I found a loophole when I was test taking, if I just said like, I'm feeling like I would have done it too. And so, but we've all been in situations we didn't want to do that ended up being the best thing we did.
Yeah. Some of the worst, at the moment weren't, but again, it shapes everybody.
And that's what acute stress is.
Mm-hmm. That's acute.
We do, in my opinion, and Dr. Phil may argue with it, and I've talked to him a lot about this, is I do think you need to stress. I think we do need some stress. It makes us stronger. It's like wood. You stress the wood to make it stronger.
You create resiliency.
Yeah. What we don't need is the artificial chronic stress that actually isn't real.
Yeah, it's the chronic. When you think of Addison's disease, we were talking about this earlier. Addison's disease is that you don't produce those fight or flight hormones. That's a problem. So when you look at, you don't have those, right? So now you have muscle wasting, low blood pressure, fatigue, but because you don't produce them. That's a problem.
And it's kind of like dopamine deficit. So if you're over dopamine and you go into the negative and people just can't even get any energy. They're not excited about life.
And then you ask the question, so what causes Addison's disease? It's because the adrenals are smoked.
Yeah.
So too much.
The boat went out with the gas.
So too much fight or flight basically caused the lack of fight or flight.
This immune system compromised with stress, I think we got to understand that. So everything is based on the immune system. Cancer, disease, illness, our cells in our body and how we can respond to it. But if we're always have the gas on, that immune system is compromised. And in Zebras Get Ulcers, he makes a great point. Let's just say he has these weird examples, but let's just say you're running from a tiger. To store energy, to put you into that fight or flight, we're beautifully designed to stop digesting food.
Yeah, you don't care. You don't care about that.
If I'm running from a lion, I don't want to stop and go to the bathroom.
It mobilizes everything you need to run as fast as you can.
So think about if you have chronic stress, and the stuff I'm talking about is not running from the bear. Emails, deadlines, family, health, relationships, finances, the news, social media. That's going to compromise your immune system. And next thing you know, you go to the doctor and things are not working how you want. And they can't figure it out. Well, we got the answer right there many times.
Yeah, the autoimmune medications have never been higher than they are today.
And they'll be higher tomorrow.
Yes.
Until we handle this.
But you're right. You've got to connect the immune system to the stress bucket.
I used to run track. And, when you're getting ready to run, you get into this performance phase. And hopefully you go to the bathroom and the body kind of tells you, like, let's clear this out because I'm going to go for a 2-mile run. And you're not going to be able to perform. And the body works magically.
Yeah, it's interesting. We played football at Sexton. Everybody's in the bathroom before, everybody's getting ready.
Yeah, you have to.
You're going into combat.
You have to.
So the body's telling you, hey, let's get ready to go.
Yeah.
And that's how but I think the big point is, again, as we start down the science piece, is that we want that acute fight or flight.
Yeah.
What we don't want is the chronic, and that's what's killing us today. It's not the acute stress. It's
The day I
chronic
go out
stress.
golfing in a tournament and I don't really get a little butterflies, I'm probably not interested in golfing
Or
anymore.
getting on stage.
Or
and
life in general. I do think
that
it's
gives you the oomph.
the oomph in life.
Yep.
All right. Real quickly, Train of Terror, the Millennial Force. You love telling the story.
Yeah. So if you've never
Are
been
you
to
scared of heights?
I am. So we went to Cedar Point when you guys were in middle school.
I remember.
And
You don't have to tell me the
I think it
story.
was you and
Kevin.
Was it Kevin? And then Kristen and was it Christy?
I don't know.
Yeah. So anyway,
annoying friends.
you and Kevin tapped out. I'm not going, but you could see this Train of Terror. I call it the Millennium Force.
Yeah, stress is contagious too. He was so stressed, and then it came to me, and then
you could see this thing miles and miles away.
Yeah, it sticks out of the sky,
300 feet in the air or whatever. And so the next thing you know,
and it was new at the time.
It was brand new at the time, and so Kristen's all excited about it. She wants to do it with Christy. They're all pumped up. That's
why we came.
That's again back to perception.
Yep.
She thinks it's great. You and Kevin are tapping out. You're not doing it.
Scaredy cats.
Mom's out.
Yep.
I'm in. I'm like, I don't want to do this with them because I don't like heights. So I still remember this like yesterday. We're under this canopy because you can't see it take off.
Sure.
Again, anticipation.
You're in line.
I'm anticipating. All you can hear is the screams, and it goes straight up.
Tick, 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 tick,
yeah,
tick, tick.
It goes straight up, and it's 300 feet in the air, and then all of a sudden it comes over the cliff, and then goes 94 miles an hour or whatever. So I'm thinking about this in a very negative way. So my gut is tied up. I'm sweating. I'm not moving. My heart rate's probably through the roof. I didn't know this at the time. I really wasn't trained in this space. And they're like, "Oh, this is so cool. It's so exciting."
Dry mouth. You can't talk.
Yeah,
You're in this tunnel.
They're the opposite.
Yeah, you're in this tunnel.
So that was kind of my first, that I'm not doing nothing except thinking about.
But the Millennial Force is an example for anything. A meeting, talking to a boss.
Yes, I'm already
conflict.
anticipating.
Yep.
It's not that the experience itself, it was anticipation. I've already worked myself up. So that's the stressor that made my body physically
And that's
react.
the disease of today is worry. So let's get into the science.
That was the worry.
The autonomic nervous system, you got two sides, the sympathetic and the parasympathetic, and it's an orchestra. It works back and forth, and you need both of them, yin and the yang. Sympathetic's what we kind of been dominating, talking about. It's
That's
the fight or flight. And the parasympathetic, and I love to talk about this just to kind of slow this down a little bit. Parasympathetic tagline is rest and digest. So this is kind of the time where we start to rejuvenate and recover. And we started today with we're under resting. And so the science even tells us the answer. You need both of those things.
Both of them.
In balance. And so how does this work? There's two big mistakes. Number one is we overestimate the threat. That's the Millennial Force.
Yep. I like, and then I loved it.
You loved it.
But at the time, I'm like, I do anything but that.
Yeah.
So I overestimated the threat.
You made it.
Made it.
And everyone listening made it. You made it through whatever you thought you weren't going to make it through.
Resiliency now. Okay, I can do this.
And then the other thing is we underestimate our ability to handle stress. If you get into a life-altering accident or near-death experience, it's like, holy smokes, I handle that pretty well.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what we're designed to really do. And it's incredible. It keeps us alive. Self-preservation is really our primal driver.
But I think if you just make it that simple, we overestimate the threat as number one. And number two, we underestimate our ability to handle the threat.
And that, to me, is, I would go, there's a third piece, is we underestimate the amount of stress that doesn't matter. So the amount of stressors that just don't matter. You don't have control over what's happening in a country you can't pronounce, never will visit. You can't control it.
Like I remember, like sometimes Dave Ramsey will say on his podcast that the president can definitely make a difference, right? But it's really, what are you doing in what you're doing in your house? That's the key.
Well, that's what you can control.
That's what you can control.
Yeah. Obviously,
you can't control.
You can vote
this.
and you
Yeah,
can
you can do all
complain.
that.
You can
But let's
conversation.
control our own house. So I think if you take more control, what you said at the very beginning, that creates people like, this is what I can do, but I can't control that. Okay, then that you kind of let it go.
So let's get into this science. You got the autonomic nervous system, the sympathetic, parasympathetic. I think of the sympathetic as the gas parasympathetic as the brake. And if you're driving a car, you know you need a combination of
And the
both of those.
autonomic means it's
Automatic.
automatic.
But there's certain things you can do to turn things on and turn them off.
So you
Breathing,
have
breathing
much
is
more control than you think.
breathing is a big deal. But I want to get into, we've talked about breathing, but let's get into the hormone side of it. And the more that I'm doing work, it's like I say hormones 24/7.
Constantly.
Well, because the hormone is a chemical messenger. Vitamin D is a hormone, testosterone, estrogen, cortisol. There's just so many things that hormones.
Cholesterol makes hormones.
Cholesterol makes hormones. And people are like, well, what does it matter? Well, that's what communicates. That's what tells your body to turn your metabolism on and off.
It's everything.
So you got stress and building hormones, and I love to talk about this. You have two sides of the equation. You have stress or survival, and then you have growth, okay, or building. And those work opposite, but they don't work at the same time. So it's like night shift, day shift, night shift, day shift.
Yep, they work together.
But if your stress is on at all times, it's no coincidence that hormonal replacement therapy or TRT or testosterone replacement therapy is at its all-time high. And my frustration is, sure, these things are going to give you a benefit if you do the replacement, but why? Why do we have a chronic epidemic of low testosterone, male and female? Well, the science tells us that the hormone for testosterone is going to be shut down with chronic stress.
Well, and you look at like growth hormone. Growth hormone is the spackling. You're putting that, into the cement to heal it, whatever. But if these hormones, what you're talking about, testosterone, growth hormone, the stress hormones, the other side, those will not do their job. They can't do their job. So now I'm worried about my bone health. Okay, well, of course, you should be. We just talked about Addison's disease, which is they don't produce these. So again, this hormonal...
And the body wastes away.
The hormonal epidemic today, we just don't understand it.
But it's back to that thing. Do we really want the answer? If you have a 55-year-old male who's told you have low testosterone, lost its desire and muscle and belly fat and blah, 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 can't sleep... The first thing you ask and I ask is, what's your stress like?
What's your sleep like? What's your stress?
That's a slow solution.
Yeah, and again, I was talking to a guy yesterday, Mark at the Mac, and Mark is a fit 75-year-old, and he asked me some questions. We were talking about the business, whatever, but we got into this conversation a little bit, and he never really heard about testosterone replacement therapy. And I said, well, he goes, why do we have all these problems then? So then we got into the lack of sleeping and the stress, and he's wow. And I said, because it's easy to do that. It's hard to do what you're doing.
Well, back to the zebras don't get ulcers. Zebras don't take testosterone either.
Again, why zebras don't get ulcers is that they go back to all they're focusing on is they just ran from the tiger or the lion.
Now I have to eat, sleep.
And now I got to go back and drink out of the brook or whatever. And the lion or the tiger has to eat. Yeah. That's their stressor. Yeah. So the zebra's running from the predator, and the lion and tiger have to eat, or they're not going to.
Yeah, and the lion sleeps 20 hours a day.
Yeah, and so if the lion eats,
then it can sleep.
Then it relaxes, right?
So then zebras get ulcers. If you ever read it or listen to it, he talks about glucocorticoids, and I heard about this in school for about 1 minute, and then there's not a connection. But everyone listening's heard of cortisol. Glucocorticoids are stress hormones, the building block that make cortisol. So, or it's a type of glucocorticoid.
Mm-hmm. It's a type.
So one of the things you wrote down here in our notes is when you produce or overproduce glucocorticoids, one of their side effect you may think about, is it blocks the uptake of calcium in the body, which leads to poor bone health. So talk about that.
So back to, should I be taking calcium supplements, or I'm just telling you, you can't have good bone health if your stress button's on, because your glucocorticoids will block the uptake of calcium. That's what it does.
So you get this female who's scared to death of falling and breaking a bone. And again, do they want to know the answer? And are they willing to change what really is going to be the upstream?
So if you want to have, if you're worried about falling, well, again, we can reframe that conversation. But really, to have optimal bone health, you have to get your stress bucket in place. The second piece is if your glucocorticoids are going crazy, you'll not be able to control your appetite. Now I'm having problems.
But I'll just take
I'll
GLP-1.
just take GLP-1.
I'll
See,
take calcium
so
supplements,
everybody can
GLP-1,
see
and hormone
where
replacement.
we're going with this stuff is like you said at the very beginning, the answer is right in front of you, but I want you to tell you why this stuff's happening.
So just to kind of pause for a second, when people come to see us, I think many people think we're going to tell them or teach them how to eat. Depending on the client, maybe there's some interest in how to exercise, or maybe they already know how and how to make it even better. But sometimes I pause people. It could be a 17-year-old athlete or a 85-year-old
Sure.
woman.
Right.
And I say, well, what's your stress like? How are you sleeping? Do you have any white space? And they almost get agitated, and then you kind of explain it. So,
but hold on for a second, because you're onto something here. So it's not as sexy. People want to, when you do a presentation, they want to learn more about nutrition. They want to learn about this supplement. They want to learn about this. They don't really care that. I mean, not saying they don't. So like I did the MIT conference a handful of years ago. These are all the top CFOs in the world. And they're in Boston and we're doing this thing. And I got 30 minutes and I came right out of the chute and talk about, I was all pumped up and I'm saying, how many of you intentionally rest? That was my first words out of my mouth. And I had them, you could hear a pin drop. That's the first, I didn't tell them this and that. I said, how many of you intentionally rest? Because I know the CFOs of these top companies, they're going 900 miles
putting out fires. Mm-hmm.
So that's where, like you were saying at the beginning here, of are they willing to do stuff? You're telling them exactly what the problem is, but I think the more they know about that, they might be able to put their toe in the water a little bit, because that's really going to be their solution.
So again, I'm probably more exposed to this having 3 young kids, but the thing I see right now is you have a lot more interest, whether it's social media or whatever, the awareness to clean eating.
Correct.
Moving your body.
Yep. NAD.
Yet I've never seen a generation so unresilient, crazy categories of disease or illness, ADHD, this acronym of this fainting and emotional disturbances, anxiety.
Yep. Which all leads to, again, back to the hormonal, and then
it's just going to show up in a different way.
Sleeping is turned in. I mean, I cannot tell you how many clients, they don't sleep, and I want to tell them why they're not sleeping. They don't want to hear that. They want to know, should I be taking more magnesium or this, this cocktail or this? No, that can help, but it's not the cause of the problem. The cause of the problem is you can't relax your mind.
Well, and that's the solution. So if you said it's not sexy, but I would say it's hard.
It is hard because you're going to have to change stuff.
Yeah, it's hard
and can't be
slow.
You can't be chasing. I mean, a lot of people are addicted to the chase. And so you slow them. We say this. If I could bring, a group of 10 people up to northern Michigan to our cottage at Douglas Lake, and they were there for, let's just say, 6 weeks, and they have no access to pretty much any, basic stuff. But
any information.
We're walking in the woods. Yeah. We're breathing. We're eating great foods. Wow, you get everybody to sleep good. You get everybody to it goes on and on. Is that real world? No. But now you realize that maybe if I start bringing some of that into my world, I could really have a better life.
And that's what I'm seeing right now is your generation. There is a stress component leading to different things. But at this younger generation, I'm a millennial, and you go deeper with the generation that's only had access to a phone. The solution is right there.
Mm-hmm.
It's how do you become present with real stress-inducing situations, acute type of stress, versus these artificial, man-made stressors that most likely will not be real.
And I think, like, if I wrote that Rusty Moo book again, the sequence I would put first would be pace and space. And then we talk about breathing and sleeping and understanding the stress piece, which we've already kind of hit, that it's physical. But then you move into, if you really sat down with most people and you look at their schedules and you ask them, if you have nothing going on this weekend, how do you feel? And they feel, I feel incredible. Then why don't you do that? Or I'll ask them, could you take a morning off once a month? Or could you take an afternoon off once a month and get a massage? And they're like, I don't know. Of course you could, but would you? That's what you're, would you actually do that?
All right. So I'm using chat as we're doing because it was driving me crazy. It's called POTS. POTS. It's the acronym. Posterior orthostatic
Yeah, some new name of
tachycardia syndrome.
Yeah.
So you go down here and you say, well, what
Tachycardia.
are the causes? Don't know. So everything has no causes. But then it goes,
I'll tell you what
potentially it's a dysfunction of the autonomic nervous system. We
just talked about.
I didn't even know that because I haven't had time to look up this POTS. But really what happens is, again, I'm going to talk to you about your kids because most people listening are going to be in their 20s or older. But let's just talk about your kids 18 or under. They're overscheduled, more pressure than ever. They're concerned about, what number they are in class and what school they're going to go into and can they fit 4 sports in a 3-season school.
Mm-hmm.
And what happens is you tax it. It's like JFK is, he had Addison's disease,
Mm-hmm.
the president of the United States, and he's running from the bears.
Mm-hmm.
His body breaks down and shuts down. And so I'm seeing a lot of this. I was always told I was ADHD. You're seeing that diagnosis. You're seeing emotional disturbances. You're seeing people not able to handle basic little bit of adaptation.
Right.
Everything is, trying to include everybody wherever they're at. And I think it's creating a pretty soft culture because we can't handle this stress. Mm-hmm. But the answer is we need more space. If you have POTS, for example, I would look and say, how much time are you spending on this thing?
Right.
Are you just scrolling social media all day? Are you playing video games? Are you exercising? Are you outside getting sunlight?
Right.
What's your lens? Is your lens that you're not good enough, not keeping up? That's the power of stress.
Well, I think that's what we never had this conversation 5 years ago, rarely, once in a while, but I always start with everybody now. I talk about this and the sequence, whatever, but I really get into the pace. I want to talk about your pace of your life. Do you like it? And you're in a different pace of your life than you will be in 5 years or Kristen will be.
Well, there's sometimes you don't have control over.
Yeah, you're in a different season.
Pace.
So let's just explore that pace. And then do you have the space to handle the pace? And that's where you start plugging in your calendar and your schedules. And that's really where I begin with everybody. So once they learn about stress that's physical, imagine if you had more space to handle the pace. And then how do you feel? You can handle it because you're more resilient. I mean, if you're trying to get people just to tap out from an exercise standpoint,
yeah,
you just increase the space.
It's not hard.
Or the pace and don't give them enough space to recover. You give them enough recovery, they're going to be fine. And it's no different. Why do we not think we need more recovery to
and if you don't want to go at a fast pace, you don't need any space. You can just go from thing to thing, but you're not moving at a fast pace.
So then we get into intentionally planning calendars. Like, why do you need to do that? Well, why do we need to do that? Do you get a massage? Do you do an Epsom salt bath? Do you walk in the woods? It's now we start plugging in some micro, medium, and
it doesn't have to always be these trendier things like red light therapy. Not that that's bad.
Yeah, ozone therapy, light therapy.
But are you doing the basics?
Right.
You micro braking? You breathing? Are you putting this thing down?
Right.
Can if I gave you a test and I told you to sit on that bench for 1 hour, watch the leaves, listen to the wind, whatever it is.
Look in the sky.
Is that uncomfortable?
Of course it will be.
And I think we talked about it a couple weeks back. Once it becomes comfortable, you now have the ability to handle stress.
Well, last weekend I told you I was up north with Marty and Patty and your mom, and we were cleaning up. And you said it today. Well, how would Marty and Patty want to do that? Well, they kind of like being out in the woods.
It's therapeutic, sure.
It's very therapeutic. And then we're physically tired.
Well, they say, putting your hand in soil is one of the
Yeah,
most
so we're
grounding
we're
things you
we're
can
we're
do.
doing the chainsaw, and then we're hauling wood, and we're raking, and we're picking stuff up, and the rocks in the water, and then
It's
later
kind of
on,
like play because
it's like yeah.
you're moving
And
and you're
so, and they both said the same thing. I feel great. I mean, I'm tired physically. I'm not so tired mentally.
you feel
You
accomplished,
feel
checked.
like you did something, you're
Yeah.
out in nature. So there's a lot to be said about that.
Yeah, I mean, learning to do the chores and the dishes, it's not about fun. It gives you some pace. And that that's a whole different conversation, but in capacity I wrote about being bored and the difference in why in today's world, I think people's torture is this idea that they're going to be bored.
Bored. Mhm.
So you're on an airplane, you look at your phone. You land on the airplane, you look at your phone. You stop at the stoplight, you look at your phone. It's like there's no space between the notes, as you say. So
Mhm.
neither one of us can do anything musically. I would say you might even be better than me. I mean, I love music, but nothing I ever
I
did.
failed my violin test when I
Okay,
was in
maybe
fifth grade.
maybe I'm better. And we know Kristen's music skills, but I don't know where you got this, but if you took a bunch of music notes and you just smushed them together, they make no sense. And so then there's this idea that it's the space between the notes that's nothing to do with the notes. Or you could take language. If I just took a bunch of letters and smushed them together, it
Well, if you
doesn't
take,
make
let's
sense.
just say you take one of the top jazz musicians, and you look at the notes of the music, and that's where I saw a presentation, and they didn't kind of do it this way, but it was kind of a thought behind that, and I kept thinking. So I look at like Duke Ellington or some of these, and you look at the notes, and they're spread out, and then if you jam them all together, what does that sound like? Sounds like garbage.
Sounds like shit, yeah.
Right? So in our world, do you have enough space between your notes? And that's where you start making the beautiful music come alive. Or if I jam it all together, how do I feel at the end of the day? I feel terrible, but I got it all in.
Right.
So that's really when you think about, do you have enough space between the notes? And you've seen a presentation before. I play the music, they hear the beautiful music, and then I jam the space together. It sounds terrible.
Sounds terrible.
Yeah.
So yeah, today you're the source and solution to your stress. We made the case that stress is physical. Well, not the case. It is physical.
It is physical.
We're trying to understand we just can't handle this chronic stress. It's melting us down.
Can't.
And I care about every generation, and most of our listeners are going to be, working class, but I really am concerned about our next generation because they're not learning, they're not being taught, they're being overexposed, and it's going to break the mind and the body down. We're already seeing that happen.
I was listening to a thing yesterday on ESPN, and they were talking about the strike zone. They're talking about referees in NBA basketball or any sport. There's always, people complaining about calls and whatever, but they're talking about the strike zone in Major League Baseball now. And now they might move it to it's like a robot. And I'm thinking, okay, there's human error. It is what it is, but that's what makes it exciting, And so now they're moving it. I go, you can't do that.
Yeah, would you want to, even though some of these golfers are robotic, would you want robots playing golf?
No. Why?
There's no deviation.
And they hit the ball the same every time.
Yeah.
Right? So,
but there's something into like these guys that were hitting it like robot, then all of a sudden they lose it.
Yeah. So I know it just hit me like, let's get back to we're going to make mistakes, and that's okay. There's trial and error, see what works, what doesn't, but we need to get back to that. And I think that what we're talking about right now, there's just so much noise that we're not enjoying the life we could leave. And I think we kind of want to leave. I think we want to leave just with a couple thoughts on what you do to help you recover.
Well, I think the big takeaway, because we could go specifically, is you need more pace or need more space to handle your pace.
Number one.
We call that white space, whether it's
planned
schedule, micro breaks, medium breaks, macro breaks.
That's where I would start with everybody's look at the amount of space you have in your world.
Yeah.
Could you expand that?
Let's start with the micro too. So do you have 2 to 3 times a day where you're being present, feeling your feet, breathing, closing your eyes, taking a couple deep breaths? Most people aren't. Most people eat their lunch while they're working, standing up, driving in a car. there's no space there.
And you just said it's a micro break. Could be 30 seconds. Doesn't take. It's just, but it's
The
playing.
way we're working has not changed, and it's melting us down. Well, the world has changed dramatically. You're doing work before work, and you're doing personal stuff at work. I mean, it's a 24/7 blurred line, and you need micro breaks at the minimum. Then you go to medium and macro.
That's where you're a big fan of massage. I'm a big fan of massage. That's a scheduled, chill pill.
And some people think meditation is woo-woo or not for me, but really what meditation is a period of being present. So however you need to do that, that's why there's things called like Marcus Aurelius's meditations. It's not just like sitting cross-legged with your fingers, but then you got hot and cold therapy, walking in nature, infrared sauna, ozone therapy, red light therapy, practicing gratitude, appreciation, the attitude of gratitude, kindness. It's interesting when they say like good customer service, are you smiling behind the phone? Well, you're not smiling to see somebody, you're smiling because it creates something. Same thing with
we were just at, what's the name of the restaurant we were just at?
Tante.
The owner, how happy is that guy?
Yeah, and he's new and he's stressed, and there's things that are he's trying to do.
Be back.
Yeah, you'll be back. Yeah, you'll be customer for life.
For sure.
And then we'll end with this. The breathing is your fastest and your only way to change stress in the moment. So it's sometimes not top of mind, but let's just say someone cuts you off and you hold your breath, you do some things, and you're now in this fight or flight rage. Taking a moment and just settling yourself and taking a deep breath, that's the only way to get out of that fight or flight.
Yeah, that nasal breathing, slow breathing, diaphragmatic breathing is really powerful to reset that nervous system.
And it goes both ways. What you do the minute you wake up is the way that you're going to sleep at the end of the day. And so one of my things I always tell people, can you go 30 minutes before bed without looking at your phone? But more importantly, can you go 30 minutes when you wake up without looking at your phone? That second one, if one takeaway today, if you just went 30 minutes after you woke up, you've now changed your whole nervous system, your whole outlook, and started your day.
Well, I think you sent me a funny video where the doctor's saying, he's got a room full of patients, and he says to him, can you not look at your phone for a minute? And they're like, no way, I can't do that.
I can't remember.
It's really funny. So it's the same thing, but that's really, that's a powerful exercise, 30 minutes before and 30 minutes when you wake up.
The truth is, stress has exponentially started to wreck us like a wrecking ball. But 15 years ago, nobody had this thing.
Right.
And now 95% approximately people swipe right the minute they wake up, or whatever kind of phone you have. And those things are all going to be reactive nervous system stimulators. And so stress is a nervous system issue. Anxiety is a stress issue. These are not, now there's complex mental health. I'm not here to tell anyone that mental health issues are not a problem or need different type of care. I'm really talking about the middle, the masses. We're just overstressed. And I'm going to say it again. We're underresting, we're overtraining, overworked, overbreathing, undersleeping, underspacing. To do more, we must rest more. And we're running from this bear. And most of the time, the bear isn't there. And so today, we're just talking about stress, the science of it, the solution for it. But I do think the answer is right there. It comes down to, do we want to know the answer? And I've seen tremendous transformation in people, but this is the rest. The reason why we talk about rest, eat, move, I would say the rest is exponentially the most powerful, but it probably takes the most time and most effort. Somebody can make your food. Nobody can sleep for you. And so to me, running from the bear, we all have been there. I've been on 6 airplanes in 6 days. But my strategy is, what can I control over those 6 days? I'm not going to drive. I'm not going to teleport, but there's things I can control.
Absolutely. You can control how you breathe.
What I do in the airport.
Yep. How you stretch, breathe, sleep. Yep. You have much more control.
Make sure I get an aisle row, because that's the key for me. But well, that's another day. So you have the power to manage your stress. You are the solution. I think the key is Do you want to stop running from that bear? We'll see you again next time.